Good afternoon, everyone on Facebook. How are you? It's Kimberly here from Talented People. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry, we're a couple of minutes late. We've got someone, Josh, who's just going to join us from a vocal point of view, considering his camera isn't working for some weird reason, despite maybe you've done too many Zooms, Josh.
Possibly. That's something that goes for everyone knows.
It's just broken. It's just had enough. But anyway, welcome along, everybody. It is lovely to see you virtually. We are going to be running these sessions now, I think, every other Wednesday lunchtime. So it'd be lovely to see you again. We really got into our stride with it last year, and then things picked back up in the industry. But obviously now we're all back on lockdown and sort of taking stock again. So we wanted to put something on for you all to keep you posted, to keep you connected to the industry again, to provide you with a bit of company, entertainment, information. So any topics, please do suggest. Anyway, this session today is on production management. And actually, it's the first session we've done specifically on production management. And part of me wonders why that is. I mean, actually, when Rosie and I set up Talented People 3.5 years ago now, we never assumed that we would do production management searches for companies. We assumed it would all be editorial. It would be senior execs, directors, things like that. And we did a couple of line producer, production manager searches along the way. But over the years, it's grown and grown. And you kind of have to wonder why that is. And we know lots of brilliant production managers. I mean, some of them are joining us here, and I'll introduce them in a sec. But it's an interesting situation, isn't it, when there are so many people in editorial, there are not so many people in production management, but it's production management that makes things happen. And we want to encourage more people into that stream. And perhaps you guys haven't really thought about that. Perhaps you're junior and you don't really know what that role entails. Perhaps you're more senior and you'd like to know how these guys work together with editorial. One of our guests today actually wears both hats simultaneously, which is fun. I want to ask her all about that. So today's guests are Helen Landeau. Helen is a line producer. She's freelance. She's working on some documentaries at the moment. Hello, Helen. There's Gemma McAllister, who is the production executive at STV Studios. Hi, Gemma. Hi. We have Suzie Marsh, who's a freelance exec producer, doing lots of live and studio and events-based stuff at the moment, aren't you, Suzie?
Hello.
Hello. Jessica Gardner, who is a creative producer and production management, wearing the aforementioned 2 hats. Hi, thank you for coming. Hello. And Josh Pitt, whose Zoom video webcam is broken, who is a head of production at Atlantic and has got lots to talk to us about today as well. So hello, Josh.
Hello, I'm waving. Hello.
Hello. The black screen of death is there.
Cheers, thanks.
He's going to keep faffing, but you know, there we go. Your input is vital, your face, not so much. No offense, but it's absolutely fine.
I've been told that many times, thanks.
We'll crack on. So, big topic, less than an hour now. Where do we start? I think I would like to start by talking about getting into production management. So, junior people, do junior people know enough about it? Shall we start with Suzie? Do you want to talk to us about what you feel junior people know about production management and what can be done about telling them about it and encouraging them into it?
So, I mean, obviously I skew on the editorial side, but certainly I think in my experience of working with young up and coming people in production management and editorial, it's that direction and people being given a direction and a path of travel, and researcher just seems like the obvious one all the time for people coming out of university. And so I think it goes back to everything in terms of training and getting people interested is going back to the unis and back in there and helping with training. I'm get involved with a company called Inspiring Futures, where you can just sign up, anybody can sign up, and your local area will get in touch with you, any schools, or I mean, we can't do it at the moment, but eventually local schools or educational establishments will get in touch with you and say, look, would you come down and just talk to us for an hour? So if you can give any of your time just for an hour to explain to kids, you know, they might be 14, 15, or they might be 18, whatever, what potential opportunities there are. And I think it starts right back down there, I think.
Yeah. What is it? You know, when there are junior people getting into TV or film or online content, And I think they always talk about filmmaking, making films. I want to make great stuff. Why is that, do we think? And how can we get them excited about production management? Gemma, what do you think?
I just think it's because the limelight's always on editorial, always has been historically, you know, and so it should be, but it equally should also be on production management. I mean, I certainly know when I started out as a runner, but then as I got in, and that was in commercials, but when I moved into production, even at that point, I didn't realise production management even existed. So I naturally took the researcher role, sat there hating every second of it, looking over to this team of coordinators that were arranging logistics and everything for the show I worked on. And I was just so drawn to what they were doing. And it was a real eye-opener for me, because I had no idea that that role even existed, or that there was even a production management side, which is just so ironic. So I think it really does start from even the press about it, and like Suzie was saying, even when it's taught in media, in the universities and discussions at school, production management's never really discussed. It's always like, oh, who produced that, who directed that? Even now, there's never that, who was the production manager, like who logistically brought all that together, because that's phenomenal. It's still not really championed now, and it really needs to be. And I think we're all trying to do play our own part in that, and to making that a bigger thing. But I think that's definitely where there's an issue. And even at award ceremonies, you very rarely do you see production management up on that stage. So there's lots of changes that need to happen.
Yes, so more knowledge about it from the fact that you can even do that job, what that job is, and then recognition when you're in that role. Helen, what was your route into production management?
Well, I'm old school. I started off as a secretary. I trained as a secretary, and BBC were advertising for secretarial people at that time. And then I'd done, various jobs working what we had an internal kind of pool production panel, in secretarial panel. So I worked in makeup, in their admin. I worked in various areas, and then I was also working as a secretary to program editors. And that also meant working not as a secretary just to the editor and senior management, but also sometimes helping out in the production team. I cut my production teeth in music and arts at BBC. And I was looking what we called then production assistants. I was interested in what she was doing. I was considered, I'm an organizer. That's my strength. And editorial just didn't appeal to me at all. It just didn't. And then did a couple of years as secretary, and then they were advertising for the production panel, production assistants panel. And that gave us pure training. That was in-house training from the BBC. So we had to do script supervision, we had to do drama, we had to do outside broadcast, we had to learn live. We had to learn PSC shooting. We had to be the all-rounder because we could have been placed in any kind of genre. I specialised in factual because that was for me. Studio didn't really appeal to me. It just wasn't my thing. Gallery work, didn't really like it. Live just wasn't my thing. But I found out PSC shooting was for me. So I got to work on various programmes throughout BBC, and that's where you honed your skills as well. And another aspect that we had to learn was post-production. So that was something that was vital within our training. So,
You've just said the word training. Like
yes.
that, I imagine. How many of the rest of you guys actually had training like that? Anyone?
No, on the job.
On the job.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what it is. I've also got to say is that production management is not seen as a profession. So, for example, like the editorial, you want to be an exec producer, you want to be an AP, you want to be a researcher. Where I find that there's no respect in what we do, because it's perceived that you can get any old bod off the street and come and do our job. And that's not the case. We work extremely hard. We do long hours, and effectively, we do actually carry the production. We've got to know everybody's job and what they do. We've got to understand the law. We've got to understand health and safety. We've got to manage the budget. You've also got to know some sort of HR skills. You've also got to deal with contracts. You've got to deal with suppliers. We've got to know everybody's job and do everything.
Yeah.
And so with that, yes, as Gemma said, you learn on the job. And I think that there is a lack of training. Even up till now, there's a horrendous lack of training. And not just for the new entrants, but as you go up the tree as well. And the industry's changed a hell of a lot. Now we've got production coordinators, but production coordinators are now coming in, doing the shoot and then going. So where is their training when it comes to post? They don't know anything. All they can do is get the rushes and do a bit of data wrangling. But that's where it stops.
And then they can't get references for that particular thing, so they don't get jobs for that particular element of the role.
Absolutely. I mean, went a couple of years ago, and I went for an interview, and the head of production asked me if I know post-production. It's kind of like that. For me, that was a weird question. Because I think as a PM, you have to know post-production. You've got to know it.
I think actually the same argument can be made, sorry to interrupt you, about being a producer director and being in the edit. It's a similar argument. Lots of people now as PDs go and PD on shoots, don't go in the edit, and that's not necessarily their fault. It's a budget and a scheduling issue because things are happening simultaneously. So in the same way that you're saying, how could you be a PM without knowing post? Actually, there's lots of sort of older school PDs who are like, how could you be a PD without going into the edit? It's similar. And actually, Josh, Black Square Josh, I was going to bring you in here because you have a kind of an interesting opinion on the sort of the binary, sort of almost binary nature of production management versus editorial, right? Is there an argument that because the editorial side is almost more subjective and it's almost more of it's a creative, you have the flair or you don't, whereas the production management, you have to learn it, that's why there's a difference?
I mean, I think you have to learn both, and I think, to a certain extent, you do need experience both on the editorial route and the kind of production management route, and I think they also do verge a lot. But I think that there's a certain element of whether it's training, on the job. I think you do get to a point in production management where you sort of have you're always learning, particularly on the HR side of things, and also on the compliance, and the tech is always changing as well. So you are always learning, but I think that you do reach a point in production management, I think, whether it's in one particular genre of television or, across multiple, whether it's live, documentary, drama, etc., where you sort of, you couldn't specialize in all of those as a production manager. I think it would be very hard. It would take a long time. But I think that, you do need to reach a point where you have to have learned those things in order to be able to sort of do it completely. And it's interesting, I have had some very qualified production managers, and I was one, if I'm honest, where the big hole in my knowledge was post-production. But I think you do need to reach a certain level of experience, whereas maybe in directing, you do sometimes sort of, I think you get breaks in your career, whatever section you go into, you do need a certain luck of the green. But I think in terms of the binary nature of it, you do reach a point where you're a relatively safe pair of hands, either as a production manager or a line producer. Whereas sometimes I think as a director, you can, people know that you might not be experienced, but they see you as very talented, or you've really earned your socks at those companies. And I certainly work at those production companies where we have young directors, and you want to encourage talent. But I like to think that also that does happen with production managers as well. And I was really lucky. I didn't have any formal training, but I worked under a really good head of production called Ulla Stribe, who was just sort of amazing, really, and she was very good at giving all the youngsters a kind of chance. And so she sort of let us sort of have step ups, but she knew there were gaps in our knowledge, So I was, speaking personally, I was quite good at shoots, but not very good at post. But
actually, I think all of you, just to jump in there, Josh, all of you have mentioned at various points the fact that somebody, perhaps I'm not sure, maybe Helen, because you had some official training, but I'm sure that all of you had somebody take them under your wing, right? And Suzie, I know that you feel passionately about that. I'm going to ask you about that in a second, but Jess, to come to you, you've worn and you wear both hats in that you are a producer, but you also PM some of your projects. Do you want to tell us a bit about your role? I'm not sure people know that exists.
Yeah, so I came up through like the promo side route into TV, and in promos, if you've ever worked in it, you're kind of expected to do everything, primarily because of budget and time. But I came in as a junior producer doing the creative, and there was never any production coordinator support for me, and so you were expected to set up the shoots, do absolutely everything yourself. So very quickly I learned production, post-production, as well as doing creative alongside it. And it just becomes second nature. And then more and more roles I think have developed as we've become more digital. I think you see more and more creative producer roles where they kind of think producer is a production-y role, and they add the word creative onto it. So again, they try and push all of those things together, make it one job. You're expected to do a bit of edit producing sometimes. So it's definitely a totally different way of thinking about things. But I do think that a lot of PMs, I think, are also naturally quite creative. I do think people kind of forget that we are quite creative minded because it's a very creative job. I mean, the amount of problem solving you have to do when you have no money or, you know, a tiny budget, and you're like, how are we going to spend this and make this work? It's actually quite creative. And I do think a lot of PMs spend a lot of time looking at the editorial and going, okay, how are we going to work this practically? And I do think people definitely forget that aspect. Which is, I think why people sort of reject the job.
Yeah, honestly, I think some of the best production managers that I ever worked with when I was directing were the ones who didn't say a flat out no with that sort of resentful face, or that sort of oh what now, when you go up to them with an idea, but the ones who go, okay, that would be amazing, I can see why you want to do that, like yes, that would fit really well with this editorial, gosh, that would really raise the bar. We haven't got the money for that, but let's work out how we can do something of that ilk. Like that, I really remember specifically one person who was that person. So that is really refreshing. So touching then on what you just said, Jess, like, you guys should tell people who are watching what the best bits about production managing are, because actually, and let me just tell you, I've had some great comments already, and guys, if you want to ask questions in the Facebook feed, just do so, and I'll keep an eye and chuck them at the panel. But Mike, Elif Bradley has just said, I've only just learnt about production manager roles after being told for months that the only way into TV is to be a runner. I'm so glad to have found this sector and love learning more about it and what transferable skills that are needed in the roles. I mean, I think being a runner is a good way in no matter what, Mike, but I do think it's brilliant to know that you've now found out about it and think that your skill set might match that. So I don't know, let's list a few things. So and I realize, Suzie, you are an exec, but you've worked together with production management. So let's start with the PMs and I'll come to you. So Gemma, what do you love about your role as production exec?
I mean, definitely you get into this if organising is your passion, 100%. So it's when the producers come to you and you've got a treatment and you're trying to get it off the ground with the broadcaster, and it's just making that come to life. It's just putting that budget and schedule together, knowing that you can bring that idea and get it on screen. And it's just putting all the pockets of money everywhere. And obviously it evolves all the way up to delivery. I mean, the budget you get commissioned is never what you end up doing, ever. But it's just pulling that all together. And also I love the recruitment side of it as well. Like Helen was saying, we wear many hats. I mean, we're all now, experts on COVID as well. And we all had to very quickly become experts, and it's just sort of a given that we can do stuff like that. So it's just all the different areas that we dip into. And yeah, like I said, I love the recruitment. It's like when you get that commission and you just know you can sit down with your producer or your exec producer and just come up with all these fantastic people that you can pull into work on the show. I do really love that. That's great.
Or Jess would just have a sit down with herself and decide who she's going to work with. Josh, what about the role in production management do you think is exciting for maybe more junior people who want to know about it and get into it?
Well, I think I agree a lot with what with everything Gemma said, and I think but also I love the problem solving aspect of it. I think that's and I think there is a creative element to that. There's a practical element. There's a technical element to that. Because you're always, you are always constantly trying to you're being given problems and try and solve them. And I think that's actually just very, very appealing. And because that is to a certain extent, that is the creative process of making television and films, is going, okay, we've got this script, we've got this blueprint, we've got this idea, how are we actually going to sort of make it happen? And so, and the fact that I think this industry across the board has dealt, relatively well, I think, with COVID, and people are shooting, it's because we've actually sort of had, probably for the past 20 years, really good risk assessment training already in this industry. So, that, so we've sort of come to it with a sort of can-do attitude, but also the skill set at the moment, and I'm very passionate about training as well, but we come with that skill set of going, okay, so this is about social distancing, this is, and in drama it's harder for sure, but yeah, I think the problem solving is absolutely the most fun about it, but also the fact that you do take a project really from the beginning to end. You see it, right from the beginning all the way through to the end, and that is actually incredibly satisfying, I find.
Right. So organisation, problem solving, beginning to end. Helen, what do you want to chuck in there?
I think more importantly, you've got to like what you're doing. As one of them, yes, you can say that what's the ingredient about the best bit about your job, but I think fundamentally you have to like what you're doing. I love the job that I do. I would say probably my bit is working with people. Yes, you do the run-of-the-mill stuff, but I think if you've got a great team, it can be the most fun. And for me, it's people, both production management, going right through to the craft skills of not only the crews, the editors as well, dealing with post-production houses. It's just dealing with people, actually, is one of my favorite bits. If I get excited about something, is when it goes, straight through post, actually, is when you see and the online, you can see the music, or you can sit in the dub and you can hear the music, and then you put on the credits, you're doing the credit list, and that for me is exciting because the product's now nearly ready and you're ready to deliver to the broadcaster. So for me, that's the exciting bit.
Yeah, and the creative. So Suzie, I mean, I think that's somewhere to bring you in here as an exec producer. And you've all said actually the job in production management is more creative than perhaps some people might think. It's not just sitting there, in front of a spreadsheet. That's actually pretty insulting. So how do you feel editorial works with production management?
There's so many aspects of it, aren't there? I feel it's a little bit of a dark art, production management, isn't it? Because it is it's really creative, and you're constantly playing with the art of what your budget ends up being, and you're moving and pushing things around. I've worked with Gemma a lot on doing that. And certainly where I work now, I work with lots of people like Jess, who are both producers with creative element. And actually I've been brought into agencies to do live events and ads, to be a sort of producer creative, to do live stuff. So I work with people in sort of Jess's position as well. And I think really that coming together of those two genres is really important. And I think part of the reason why sometimes it isn't is because this whole thing of bringing in, it's down to budget in a way, because you're bringing in the talent as you need it and for as little time really as possible. You can get away with it, which is why PDs get thrown out the edit, etc., which is not ideal, and certainly it's happened to me. But I think that sort of coming together as a team, and everybody's basically said working with lovely people is the way it works best, and that is absolutely true. And having that wonderful relationship where because I will go and ask, I won't go and demand, Gemma will back me up, I will go and say, can I do this? I really want to do it, can we do it? Whereas other people will say, I need to do it, or I want to do it. And that's not the approach when you're working as a team. It is a team. It is one holistic group of people all working to the same end. And sometimes it doesn't work like that. And that's about how people approach the situation when they need something changed or amended. And certainly Jess, I'm sure, wrestles with herself. But I have to, literally on the productions that I do now, which I'm doing a massive production next week, there's like 5 of us. And that's how it works. I don't have an AP. I don't have, we just don't have enough people in the resource that we're doing to muck about with it, or we have to get on, we have to work together. But also I think the opportunity is there for everybody to look down, if you will, to look at the next people coming up and not be afraid of them coming up, and to encourage them to come up and to find places where they can come and you can teach them. Every single one of everybody watching has skills they can pass on. So one of the producers I've got working for me on something else, it's her first producing gig, but I'm giving her that chance, and I'm mentoring her the whole way to make sure she can then walk out there saying, I can now do that as a producer, because I'm not frightened of anybody taking my job, to be honest, don't care. It goes away, it goes away. But we have to facilitate that new talent coming in, because then I will go and hire her again, because I know she'll do it how I want it done, if nothing else, in the way that I want it done. So it serves you a purpose as well, I think. So it's a teamwork between us. We are together, absolutely, and not being afraid if you can, which I know time is the problem, but I'm very happy to give 10 minutes or 15 minutes a day to to the producer, actually, if you done it like this, or maybe we can go and ask that, and how about this, you know, because you only make it better for yourself in the end if you want to be selfish about it. But
yeah,
just
put that way, that really feels like we could all make a massive difference, actually, if we all invested 10 to 15 minutes in somebody else a day. I mean,
I do that with my production co-ord. I always do that. Any time that I'm on a production where I have a co-ord, I will sit down at the start of the production or when they start and just say, right, okay, what is it that you want to learn? What is it that you want to get out of this gig that you're doing? You know, so if there's something, you know, if they want to learn about a cost manager, I'll take the time and I'll show them, you know, walk through with them a cost manager. If they want to learn about post, I said, fine, okay, well, these are the things that you need to do about post. I'm doing that now with my co-ord. You know, she wanted to know about more post. I'm involving her now in post-production. She wanted to know about how to work a cost manager. I took some time out. We had a morning, and through Zoom, I just went through schedule by schedule how it works. This is what you do. This is how you calculate fringes, you know, and she was grateful for that. But I don't mind imparting my knowledge onto that, because I think that, as Suzie said, if you want it done it right, you got to give it.
I think some people are scared of letting other people do it because they'll think it'll take longer, they won't do it the way I want them to do. But I've had that situation doing live shows as well. Nobody has any patience. But I had one girl that I went in and helped on a show once, and she said, I'm not allowed in the edit. I'm like, get in the edit now and let's do this, because you are going to be doing it next week on your own. That's how you know, and then she was allowed in, because actually you're reducing the skills of your team if you don't show them what else they can do.
I think that comes back to a lack of training of management. Like, no one in telly gets management training, so therefore you want to hug the role that you do and everything else, because then you can control it. And actually letting go and delegating and teaching is quite a skill of its own.
And because you're your own team, where you get sent off to other places, you have no ownership. You know, I'm freelance, have been for 25 years. Nobody really cares about where I go next, or any of us. And we're all very aware that we're on our own sometimes. But actually, the more you reach out and bring in people to you, the more that you will have a team that follows you and stays with you. And you gradually, by ripple effect, create more and more people work, you know, which is what I try and do, is we all do, is take people with us, but not being scared that anybody's going to take anything from you, because you will only ever make better contacts and better workers around you.
Do you think there's a reason why there aren't many men in production management? Josh, I mean, how many other male production coordinators or PMs have you ever come across or worked with?
Not many. I mean, there is a sort of reduced, although, you know, I did work with one when I was kind of working on all the sort of drama docs, you know, 10, 15 years ago. But there's a bit more in features, I think, but in docs, I don't know. I've often asked that question myself. I think because maybe role models, possibly there just aren't that many males, and you know, birds of a feather tend to flock together. Maybe that's the reason. You know, there are definitely substantially more women working, particularly in factual or non-scripted television. You know, I don't know. I mean, I sort of, you know, oscillated between you know researching and production management as well, but I definitely decided that I wanted to go into it. In commercials, that's not the case. So obviously in commercials, it's a slightly different setup. So producers are basically production managers in commercials, you know, and, you know, it's a very different format, but in there, it's a pretty even split, actually.
I mean, obviously the same can be said about diversity. You know, we simply have not enough production managers to start with, and there is also not enough people from diverse backgrounds. There's also not enough guys. It's just, you know, we are so keen to encourage people, especially those who are sort of researcher AP level, who haven't really ever thought about it, or are looking like Gemma did at the team next to them and thinking, I'm a really organized person, and actually this is quite stressful, this editorial job, and hopping between freelance role. I mean, I know that as a PC and a PM, you're still often freelance, but your contracts are much longer. That's definitely worth thinking about. And that's also why these people are very difficult to find, because they don't often become available, because obviously good ones, if you're a great one, you'll never be out of a job because your company will keep you rolling or make you staff. So I would really encourage those of you who are thinking, well, I don't know about if editorials for me long term, or if, you know, I want to be a PD, I can't really see that, then do have a think about your skill set being transferable across to production management for sure.
Can I address the diversity one?
Yes, Helen, go.
It's down to opportunity, and that's all it is. We're from a diverse background, and this is whether, no matter, not even if you're Black, you know what I mean, Asian, whatever, is getting that opportunity, because you're having to prove yourself on each job that you do, and you're having to know that knowledge a lot more than anybody else, unfortunately, but you're not getting the opportunity, no matter how hard you try. So with that, we are out there and we're bloody good, but you need to give us the opportunity for us to prove ourselves, you know. And as I can't remember who it says, but you know, if you have somebody who's taken you under your wing, and I've seen it myself, you know, you come in as a production secretary or a production coordinator, and you're with that head of production, they will take you up that ladder. So there's no opportunity for anybody of diversity to come in there and just say, you know what, well, I can prove myself. So that person's up the greasy pole already, and you're still trying to climb it, you know, but you do have the knowledge. So you know, it's not easy. You can see that, you know, from last year, it is changing a little bit at a time, but you know, it's been a long time coming.
That goes back to schools though, doesn't it? It's about telling people in schools and going to the various different places just geographically in terms of where media is even considered. When I go to these places and I talk to them about what you can do, they have no idea what the industry is. And I say, you can do any single job you can think of and happen in the media. You can be a florist, you can be an accountant, you can be anything at all, and it can be in the media and you'll get better paid for it. So going to those places, which, you know, that's why I think it's really important for everybody here, anybody watching, to go and put your time into locations, to schools, to give them those opportunities to see, because those kids, and they were very diverse in their background, had not a clue what was on.
No, and this goes, for working class. This goes for working class people as well, of all colours. You know, they're very much underrepresented. The working class. So I think with that, they also don't really get a fair crack as well. And I think, again, this goes to opportunity and it goes to training, because as you go up the greasy pole anyway, there's not much support between PC and PM. Right, so they've introduced something called the JPM, but they don't really tell you in terms of getting from JPM to PM unless somebody gives you that opportunity. Fine, you're at PM. Where do you go then to be production exec or line producer? There's no training.
No.
So you can have the training for the new entrants, and then you go up the greasy pole, but then you're left on your own.
Well,
so that's what I said. So that's what I'm saying. So it comes back then to, in terms of I want to say a disrespect of our profession, because if you've got the greasy pole, if you're going to be a self-shooting person, you've got all the courses there for you to increase your skills in terms of self-shooting, edit producing, as you go up the ladder. For us, we're having to learn, it's about opportunity, finding that right person, and a bit of luck really in terms of getting up the greasy pole. On the downside as well, you have those who are going up the greasy pole who just want to go up the greasy pole but haven't got the skills to back them up. And then when you get that greasy pole, when they get into trouble and you're finding, hang on a minute, I've got to bail you out because you're so far up the ladder, but you actually haven't understood or honed in your craft. And I always say, as a PC, hone your craft. Don't be quick to go up the greasy pole because you've been doing it for 2 years. Give it at least 5 to 8 years. It might sound like a long time.
Oh, we would love
really
PCs with 5 years experience. That would be amazing. Yeah, it would be really good.
Really do, absolutely. But you really do need to know your craft. Before considering of going up to PM.
Jess, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to answer some of your questions actually in a minute, because we've got some questions coming in. About 15 minutes left of the session. Jess, did you make a conscious decision then to do both for us? So just a reminder for those of you who've just joined us, Jess is a creative producer in mainstream telly as well as digital and commercial, right? As well as production manager, depending on the project. So how did you get into that? Was that by accident, or because you were doing one thing first and then you went across?
It was by accident. You know, I trained as a creative. My degree's in English, not TV. You know, I wanted to write scripts initially, and I went into a company as more of a junior producer script writer. And again, it came down to opportunity. You know, they needed someone to give something a go, and I had a lovely production supervisor that gave me the opportunity. And so I became more of a fully fledged junior producer, but you would have to do everything yourself. And again, you are just learning on the job. That was a complete total learning curve. So I didn't have proper formal production management training. It was all learned on the job, learning from my peers, getting feedback from an editor and saying, no, this is not the process, it's not how we do it, and getting feedback from everyone around you and just absorbing it, I think. But yeah, definitely not a conscious decision, but I do think I enjoy doing both. I do enjoy the entire process of making a production. But again, I think most PMs do. And that's why people do forget that we really do love the editorial side. We're just not managing it. But we love it because that's why we're making programs. And I think people forget that, we have to go through the scripts as much as everybody else and look at all the revisions and what's changed in the edit, because we need to have an eye on everything, and we love it. And as you said, like a good PM, if a producer or director comes up to you and says, can we do this? We have to value our project enough to say, can we make that work? And I do think people completely forget we're not admin. I've had so many people say, oh, yours is just an admin job. And I was like, no, it's not just admin. It's about totally, as you've all said, it's about totally loving the craft and loving making telly or film, anything media, I think.
Love that. I feel like you all need a mug.
It's the only position as well that you've got to be across so many other departments. Yeah. Like we've all said, legal, compliance, health and safety, contracts, HR. Like literally, we have to have our hands dipped in so many departments, and we sort of are the hub of all that. So it's a really interesting job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to take some questions now, and there's lots of people actually who are watching, so thank you. I hope this is really useful. And there's quite a few junior people, I think, who are asking for advice. So Tammy, I found your message somewhere, who's asking, she's looking for a production secretary role, her first production secretary role, something she would love to do. Where should she even start? So do we think people should still go in as a runner? What's the best way for someone to get into the stream of production management at a junior level, do you think? Anyone want to go?
I think
Josh?
probably office assistant, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, because you can really get to, some jobs when you can find from some companies, if you're going as an office assistant or just an assistant to like senior editorial, you can really get a good overview of how it works. And that's how I started as a secretary. You get to see an overview of all the different jobs of what people do. And I think that's a good point to start, because then at least you can see what each person does. And then you think, you know what, I actually like that. If it's a case of a production assistant, production manager or production coordinator, you can get a real good overview of the company, how it operates.
So even a PA role, like secretary, office runner, office, a reception even, right?
Even still, absolutely.
Well, one day when we can get back to a physical building. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful, Tammy. Who else? Edward Cook, thanks for your question, Edward. He's asking if we have any advice on gaining coordinator skills during working from home when it's harder to be able to sit down with someone to talk you through it. So he's a production secretary looking to step up. So can you think of any ways he could kind of complement his skill set already in order to, push on as a PC when the world hopefully goes back to normal?
I mean, there's lots of mentoring that does go on now. There's becoming more and more of that. You can find them on all sort of social media platforms. I mean, that's generally where we do most of our recruitment, or if we are offering any internships or courses internally, that's generally where we'll put it. But I'd say the mentoring's a good one. Try and find someone that will mentor you and take the time out and show you the way a little bit. That's what I would recommend. Yeah,
Edward, if you've worked with anybody recently who is sort of more senior than you, actually in any capacity, doesn't necessarily have to be a direct report. And
don't feel scared to be quite open. There's lots of production management, production coordinator, runner Facebook pages, and we all use them. And don't be afraid to go on it and say, I'm looking to grow this skill. Is there anyone out there that will help me? and you know, we're a really friendly bunch, and I bet someone would come forward and spare some time. So, you know, don't be scared to speak up and put it out there.
I think that's a really good point. I think at the moment, especially, there's a lot of goodwill. There's actually also some people with a bit more time than normal. So whilst you should be able to do this at any point, that's great advice. This is a good time to be doing that.
I do think you could also just generally, if you're already a production secretary, I think junior people, and I know I was guilty of this, are really bad at speaking up and saying, I want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, some people don't, because PMs are so busy most of the time, if you don't speak up, people don't know you necessarily are like, oh, actually, I want to do something else. And they might say, oh, well, you can help the coordinator on this because they're massively overloaded. And actually, that's a really good way of learning a new skill from the coordinator and supporting at the same time. It's a really good way to just support the team. But voicing it is really important because I was terrible at that.
Yeah, and it shows that you're being assertive. I mean, I think we've always advised people to, when they finish a contract as well, to ask for feedback before you leave. Ask for just a 10-minute chat with your boss and say, look, I would like to know what I did well and where the areas are I could improve. And it doesn't really happen that often. And I think it could only be a good thing, because you're showing them that you care, you're showing them that you're assertive and you want to learn. And then hopefully you're also hearing basically the reference that they're going to give you before they give it. So.
And also Green Skills do have mentoring programs. So you can either be a mentor or a mentee, and you can sign up for those mentorship. You know, there is a plan and there is a place, but there's also, you know, there's a structured environment to it, isn't there? So you can make sure that everybody commits what they can afford to commit.
Yeah. Interesting one here about the relationship between editorial and production. So Andy Mallon's question, what do PMs and PCs wish that editorial would know or think would help the relationship between the two streams? So Andy's a casting producer on Ents and Fact Ent shows, who loves an Excel doc. And he thinks that the relationship between production and casting is really important, in particular with regards to COVID. And we literally could not do our job without good PCs and PMs. So we'll hear to that. But yeah, what do you guys think? Josh, before you need to nip off, what do you think production management wish the editorial would know to make the relationship between you two work better?
Big question. But I think first of all, you know, as a couple of people alluded to earlier, you know, people do have to realise that we don't just do admin. There has to be sort of mutual respect. What do I wish? I mean, I've been quite lucky, you know, touch wood, that generally I've sort of been lucky enough to work with quite a lot of editorial people who do, even if, you know, they do sort of do my job in 5 seconds. I think there is some even in begrudging respect. But I think that, yeah, just an understanding that we do have quite a lot to manage and to do all at once, I think, and often, and also, you know, that just because editorials made a decision, it doesn't then mean that actually they can sort of, you know, it's often at 5:30 on a Friday night and you're like, okay, it's now, you want this for 6 a.m. on Saturday. But I think, you know, also the door swings both ways, and that sometimes I think production management does have to say you really have to make a decision now. And I would also say that, you know, use heads of production, use exec producers actually, and to a certain extent, you know, if that relationship, try and catch it early. Actually, if you see that there is a sort of, you know, it's about feeling an awful lot of this job. And if you think, okay, I've got someone editorial who doesn't necessarily respect the process, regardless of whether they respect me or not, doesn't really matter. But if they don't respect the process, that these certain things take a certain amount of time, whether it's booking a flight, organising kit, or getting permission to go and film it, really difficult, because these things take a certain amount of time. And if you sniff it out, you know, it's difficult in a lockdown. But I think it's just sort of saying, you know, I've got a slight concern here. And I think HOPs will generally listen to it because they've been there before. And it's not a criticism of the person, it's not, but that's one way of doing it. So always try and catch problems before they become massive. I think have your emergencies early.
Plan your emergency in good time.
Plan your problems. And if you get that sort of feeling of, do you know what, I think that, you know, that there is a sort of thing. And, you know, I've worked on some productions where, you know, directors just haven't respected anybody, you know, or, you know, but as I said, I do think it swings both ways. And I think also production management sometimes needs to respect that. And I think, you know, everyone here, I'm sure does, but, you know, sometimes I've had production managers who don't realize that sometimes being a director or producer can be a pretty lonely job and a pretty tough job. And it's fine until they go into that edit and they watch what you're doing, and then they come out and they, you know, you've seen producers with and directors with, you know, let's say quite confident in themselves, but you know, crushed after some of these viewings, and that's tough as well. So I think that mutual respect on both sides actually sort of really helps.
I love that. Yes, mutual respect. Okay, thank you, Josh. Richie West, hello Richie. He's talking about pay actually in that relationship. So he finds that JPMs and particular junior production coordinators, which is a kind of new thing, which I'm not all that okay with myself, I don't know about you, are just terms created to pay production staff less for doing more work under the guise of stepping up. Helen, what do you think to that?
I think I'd noticed from about last summer, probably in the height of the first lockdown, and things were starting to tick back up again. And I'd noticed that some jobs were being advertised looking for a senior PC or JPMs. When you look at the spec, these were for a full-blown experienced production manager. I understand that with the lockdown, you know, budgets got a bit tighter. I just thought it was just rather cheeky. But at the same time as well, I think, I don't know, I'm of the mindset, if you buy cheap, you buy twice. Because if you're going to get somebody you're going to get them in at a lower rate, but they're not going to bring the experience with it. And then you're going to have to bring in a PM who's going to basically fix it. So you might as well just spend the money one time and hire somebody who have the correct skills for what you want to do. But I had left the industry for about 8 years, and I'd noticed that when I came back, you know, they have these step changes, you know, assistant production coordinator, or, you know, a JP. What is that? You're either one or you're not.
Right. I mean, I think the title that is here to stay is JPM. That seems to have been around for long enough. But even that, I do think, is that not, especially when you see JPM credits stacked up on top of each other for years on a CV, that's not okay. Like, I think you're either not okay at that job, or the companies are just taking the mick, because you should be a production manager after maybe one or two. Fine. That's a kind of acting up. I get that. But PM now, please.
Well, a bingo. And I think this is what this alludes back to Jessica for what she said. If you feel that you have done a particular role and you know that you have gone above the grade of which you're hired, ask for that credit. Ask for it. You know, if you know that you've got a certain amount of JPM credits on your CV, and you're now going for another job, and you know that you've gone beyond the remit of what you're hired to do, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking, say, you know what, I might be coming in as a JPM, but for X, Y, and Z, I believe I deserve this PM credit.
I've done that before with people. When they've come to me, they've come as researcher, but I've let them leave as an AP because they've proved themselves throughout. And if they want, and I think that's absolutely right to be able to allow them to put that credit on afterwards.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
It's the only way to do that.
Question from, well, kind of a general comment actually from Creena Jones Forrest. Hi, Creena. Creena's been a single parent for the last 10 years here in the UK. So I presume perhaps you were somewhere else before. I don't know. Found it very hard to get back into TV production work in the UK. She's asking about training for updated skills for PM, etc. And locations for productions are not necessarily near where she lives. So that can be problematic. Helen, you mentioned you left the industry and came back, and there have sort of been changes in the meantime. How did you kind of get up to speed with what was new?
Well, I can, you know, I'm a single parent myself. So based on that, so I'd left for 8 years, and I left, you know, for considerably a long time. And my old producer friend of mine from BBC, and she posted something on Facebook called Media Parents. And I contacted them. And Amy Walker and the team are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Because you think, well, I ain't going to get a job. I was thinking, no one would hire me at the time because my last credit, when you ask for some, particular company asked me, well, when was your last credit? Well, 8 years ago, and it was, it was difficult even getting a production secretary job. But Amy Walker and the Media Parents crew were really good in terms of crafting your skills, crafting your CV, and helping you get back out there. I didn't think it. I thought the ship had sailed for me, but no, it wasn't. They were really good. So I would try Media Parents.
I would also just
Telly Mums as well. There's Telly Mums group on Facebook. Another really good one now.
Yes, Telly Mums and the crew there, Lou, Patel and Co, and Michelle, yeah, they're excellent. But I would just say, from our point of view as a staffing company, you guys in production, whether that was like 20, 30 years ago or last week, you are so valued and valuable because there just aren't enough of you. And if you love your job and, even if you're a bit rusty from having a break or you're not sure about your next promotion, we need to hear from you, and we would champion you and find, as long as you flag the areas that you feel that you need extra help with, we would always rather put you forward for a role with having had a conversation with you and highlighting the bits that you're great at, and then the bits that perhaps you need a bit of extra support on. Because honestly, the production companies that we work with, who are usually absolutely lovely, they need you, they want you. And rather than have a hole in the team with no one, because everybody is booked up for ages, they'd rather have someone who just needs a bit of support in the role. So I would say be confident. There aren't enough of you. You are unicorns, as so many people say.
And don't be scared of asking what you need. I mean, I live in Norfolk, and work predominantly for me has always been London. I've got 2 young kids, and whenever I've gone for jobs, I've always been very upfront and said, I can't be in the office 5 days, but you will get everything. I will keep, I will support, I will deliver, but I might need a few days at home. That's just how it is for me. And I've mostly never had an issue. You've just be confident, don't be scared. And also, with that, you'll find the right companies. You don't really want to work for a company that thinks you must be in front of a computer screen 5 days a week, because it's just silly. It's such an old way of looking at things. I really champion, and I always have done, because it's always worked for me and I've seen it can work, that you don't have to be in the office 5 days a week. So I would definitely say to working parents, especially in production management, like ask for what works for you. Don't be scared. And the right company, you will find the right companies and the right people that will support you.
I agree with that. But back in the day, you never had that opportunity.
No, you didn't.
You did not at all. It was kind of like constantly presenteeism. And to a certain degree, some companies still see presenteeism.
Yeah, they do.
But that's now been completely blown out the water now with lockdown.
Right.
So now companies can't say we must have you in the office. Well, it's kind of like, well, no, that doesn't really work for me. So they can't come back and just say, now we must have you in the office, because it's kind of like, well, I managed to deliver a series or deliver a program throughout lockdown. You don't need me in an office.
I would just also say, I mean, we were talking about parents, but I have 2 long-term chronic illnesses, and there are times where I can't physically drive my car just because I just can't walk. So I can walk downstairs and go into the office, and it's the same thing. I think for people with disabilities or chronic illnesses, lockdown's kind of been amazing because we can work from home, and I think still apply for those jobs. I don't worry about it. And also loads of London companies are hiring people remotely now anyway, and just saying when we get them back into the office. But I think things will change when we get back to whatever normal is normal. Yeah, for sure.
That's a really good point you make, Jess, and something that I think by being upfront about your disability as well will encourage others too. And we have found it very liberating to be sitting here and able to encourage or tell clients very, very openly about either where someone lives or their current working circumstance or their disability with their permission or their background, because actually it's like lots of barriers have been knocked down by this current pretty obviously otherwise horrific situation. At least there seems to have been a bit of advancement from that point of view. So that is really good to hear from your point of view. I'm going to take one more question. We've got maybe a couple more minutes left. Christina Frencham. Hi, Christina. She says, I was an OB production manager for 3 years and worked my way up for administrator in the company I was employed at for 10 years. Since I found myself looking for work in the freelance world, I'm hitting a wall with prospective employers who don't seem to think I have the right experience. Or am I underqualified for production coordinator or manager roles, etc.? How can I change this? I think send us your CV, Christina, and we'll take a look at it. I think it's how you position yourself, I suppose. Have you guys sort of got any comments about going from OB production manager to either a PC or a PM in another stream?
Depends on what she wants to do and what area she wants to go into, I'd say. If it's, if you're taken from OB, she'd be great in sport. Fantastic in sport, if she likes that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think if you're a good project manager, I think live is a pretty tough gig. You know, and you know, I would always look at it because I have quite a lot of respect for live. And so I would always look at it, and I think it is how you sort of position yourself. And again, it's about training and sort of saying, okay, I think if you've got the right attitude, and I meet with you and I think, okay, well, you know, I might have to help you a little bit on your first gig, but after that, you know, you'll be fully fledged. You know, I think I'd be comfortable about it. I think, you know, I'm always helping people as a HOP, because everyone, you know, you just have to keep doing that to a certain extent. Some people have issues going in their personal life, which means that they might need a little bit of help. So, you know, I think that just be upfront about it. But I think if you can definitely learn it, and certainly if you've been a production manager in OBs, you can definitely get, you know, coordinator or JPM, you know, whatever. But yeah, for sure, and just get your spurs there, and then straight after that, you'll probably be able to just get onto it. You know, scheduling is everything in television, and that might be something which you've got to kind of learn a bit, because that, you know, the schedule does make or break the budget in most TV stuff, more so than say live probably does. So you might need to kind of have a little bit of training on that and a little bit of help on that. But I think it's very transferable skill, very transferable.
Yeah. Oh no, and I can't believe I've left this to the end, really. We probably should have thought about this before. So hopefully people can hang on for a few more minutes and not go on to their 2 o'clock Zooms. But the subject of pay here from Sarah Lunt, she's surprised that pay for PM roles compared to editorial roles hasn't come up. For me, that's something I'm finding more and more demoralizing, knowing that as a PM with many years experience, I generally earn half of what a producer is making. There is a discrepancy, isn't there? You can't put the PD side by side with PM or PC side by side with AP. They are different. Is there a reason for that you guys can't explain, or is this something that needs sorting out?
Again, I think again a disrespect for what we do, and they just, you know, we're seen as admin, and I think that our pay is not comparable, as you said, with editorial. It is frustrating and it can be demoralizing. I think if you feel that you are worth your rate, and you're at your interview and you say what your rate is, you know, that's your rate. I've gone into an interview when, you know, I know that the rate that I told her was definitely industry standard. And this hop told me, oh, you're a bit expensive, aren't you? Well, that's my rate. And I'm not going to go down, because that's, unfortunately, I got burnt that way, because when you try to undersell yourself, you're giving them so much of your skill set. Your skill set is your product. That's what you're bringing to the table. And I think that if you feel that you're worth a particular rate, then state that that's your particular rate. It's not easy when somebody says to you, you know, what's your rate? And you're thinking, well, if I just increase it by that much, I think it's a bit high. And then you said, well, I'm open to negotiation. So that power is taken away from you. So I think if you're going to go in with your rate, you know, you don't know what the budget is, but if you go in with your rate and be confident with it, then state what your rate is.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that needs addressing in the industry. And, you know, certainly I can speak for myself. For all the budgets I put together, I'm generally, as I'm putting the budget together, I'm slowly trying to get those rates up so they're comparable now with editorial, but it is an issue. But I'll tell you what's also interesting. So I once, last year or year before, had a conversation with the director, studio director, and where she was praising the production manager of that show, and I said, out of interest, what do you think production managers earn? And she was like, well, I guess it must be the same as editorial. And I was like, no. And I shared in general what production managers earn, and she was absolutely shocked. So I think there's a real naivety, and people don't have the knowledge as well outside of production management actually what they're getting paid. And so I think the more vocal we are about it, the better. But I mean, certainly the people that put the budgets together, we definitely have a responsibility that we've got to start edging those rates up. I mean, sadly, we can't go from A to B in one go, but definitely every time we put a budget together, ease them up, and we will get there. We need to get there, actually. They do need to be on par.
It is ironic, isn't it, that the people who are, you know, who are trying to get their rate up are you guys who are doing the budget.
It's not just secretaries, coordinators, it's all the way to the top.
Yeah. I think, you know, I've got to jump onto another Zoom, so sorry, but I think to second what Helen's saying, I think, you know, the PMA has published some established rates. I think stick to those. I think if you're a production manager with sort of 3 credits and you're not on 4 figures, per week. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just not working. And I think also I would say is please don't drop your rate, because then it just becomes a race to the bottom.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and then we're all screwed. So, I think, and also, I've been at broadcast for 5 years as well. We never take production management out of the budget. Some production companies won't necessarily value it, but I think stick to your rate, know your worth, look up the rates. They're quite well, and I think if you are working on projects where you are earning half of, say, the editorial lead, then that's probably wrong, because let's say you've got an editorial lead who's on X amount of money. It doesn't matter what genre of programming it is, whether it's daytime or high and factual or anything. I've never seen it where it's half that rate.
Yeah, me too.
There's something wrong there. So, that's just, that's not on. It does need addressing, but yeah, that's not right. So I think stick to your rate, and, at the end of the day, I think there's a really good phrase, which is production management's an investment. It's not a cost. And actually, if you buy somebody correctly, then you'll end up saving money, because they'll run the production properly. You won't sort of get, a load of archives and not cleared at the end, and it becomes
over budget.
And
then you've lost.
So I think look up your rates, ask mentors, people in the industry, and say, what do you think I should get? What do you think I should say?
Yeah.
Don't, and I think also never name your price first. Say, well, what you're paying, and then see what they want to offer is also a good
that is a good shout, actually. Yes, ask them what they have in the budget.
They'll have a figure in mind.
Yeah,
because they'll have submitted a budget to the broadcaster as well, so they'll know what they've got. Anyway, I've got to go. I'm so sorry.
Yes, go, Josh. We're going to wrap up now anyway.
Nice to meet you all.
You head off.
Thank you
so much.
In the dark as ever. So sorry. Okay,
thanks for your input, though.
Cheers.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
And Jess, obviously, you're worth twice the price, because you are PM and producer. So do you just double your rate, right?
No, I think people see me as a cost-saving exercise. They're like, and I've had it loads of times. I'm kind of one of those people that can plug a hole, and so they will add the work onto me if I'm PMing, or the other way around. And I've done it before, where I've done like 3 jobs in one go, and you're like, you're not paying me enough for the 1 role, never mind the 3.
Wow.
And it does happen. People will just push that workload onto you, which I think comes back to why there's so many. I think I said to you on the phone, why there's so many females in this industry compared to men. I think there's a chronic problem with us saying no, or saying that's not my job, because we are very good at going, okay, let's make this happen, let's fix this, and being very proactive. Whereas the male PMs, I've only worked with a couple, but they're very good at saying that's not my job.
Yes. Yeah.
The salary as well. They're more happy to say what their salary is, and women just aren't.
Yeah.
And they have to be.
We're all very British. We don't talk to each other about our rate.
In terms of the rates as well, because unscripted has been left behind. You can go and see a Bet2 rate card for drama, for commercials, for everybody, but unscripted is left behind. But that's been remedied now. So there is an unscripted branch for Bet2, and I'm the production management officer. So we are working, on a rate card for unscripted. So
Brilliant.
Be patient, people. It's coming, but
we'll
be patient. Yeah.
Great. Well, look, I've really enjoyed this session, guys. If you watching have not sent us your CV and you want to be on our books, just send it in. There's a link on our jobs board, actually. So if you go to talentedpeople.tv, go to our jobs board, and you'll find the send us your CV link. You get straight into our database. You can tell us all about you and what jobs you'd like to hear about. But yeah, thank you for coming. I mean, I think overall from this chat, I think there's been some lovely comments, people saying, look, thank you. That feels really reassuring to hear these comments. I think, you all need to know your value. I think if you're an organized person who still loves the creative, but in a slightly different way, you should get into production management. Try it out, ask people about it, ask us about it. We would love to, we'd love to have more people into the production management stream, and you'll never be out of a job. I'm saying that, and I realise actually potentially insensitively, perhaps there are still, because some productions are falling down, people are still looking for work, but in normal times when things are super busy, you won't be out of work, and you'll love it just as much. It is super creative. It is not just admin. Taking that away
until there's a problem.
Well, until there's a problem, yes. But I've also taken away from this, please don't drop your rate or we'll all be screwed.
Yeah.
From Josh, which I quite enjoyed that. So yes, thanks everyone. Please stay safe and well. These will happen every other Wednesday, more if we can manage it. But yeah, thank you guys, Helen, Gemma, Suzie, Jess and Josh, who've gone for your time, and have a very good rest of your week. We're over the hump. See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.